I'm Ian from Queensbury, and today I'm talking to Philip Laing, who's one of our support team. And I've got a lot of time for Philip. He's the go-to guy that solves a whole lot of problems for us. So, Philip, tell us a bit about yourself, first of all.
Sure. I've worked for Queensbury since it took over the lab here in the mid 2000s, but I've worked at the lab for about 10 years. I've been in the photographic industry working in many labs and photographic processing since 1991.
And you're a digital fan, aren't you? You enjoy the technology. You seem to know about pretty much everything involved in the photographer's workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so the reason why I wanted to talk to you was that I was talking to Jessica Mills, our color management consultant, the other day, but I wanted to talk to you about the really practical issues that you guys deal with in the front line, so to speak, not to mention the client's front lines
Yeah.
every day. So to me, it seems like there's always a backstory to the problems that come up to you, and I sort of talked about you guys as sort of detectives. And so when something goes wrong with PhotoJunction, or when people have questions about the lab issues and so on, it's really a matter of burrowing down and trying to figure out where that problem lies. And it does seem to be different almost with everybody that calls. Would you say that, or am I exaggerating?
It's not so much different. There is a little bit of commonality, but there are lots of variables, between the operating system and, the age of the operating system and the computer and the user's experience and, what the user's done. So there's all of these variables that get thrown into the mix, and they vary on, of course, for each occasion. So there's a whole lot of different things that can go wrong, and there's a whole lot of things that, we've got to try and find out what's happened and for whom.
Right. So anyway, whatever way you want to slice it, it's your experience, I think, in dealing with these things, and the people that support PJ, for example, that gives you that insight so that you can fix things. Certainly it's beyond my pay scale, I think. But anyway, I thought that a good place to start would be to talk about our test print procedure, what it's for and how it works, and how we can use it to introduce ourselves and the customer to us. So just tell me about that. How does it work? What do we do?
And so basically, what we ask the clients to do, first-time printing clients, now they get free test printing on their first order. And with Remix, we've introduced the feature recently to indicate whether they have had test prints previously, so they can indicate within Remix, within the album setup window, that they'd like test prints for this order. So what we do is we get them to send us PSD files for album work, and we would select 5 of them, or they can nominate 5, and we'll color correct them so that they would be to what we would call full color service standard, and we'll send them 5, the same 5 as print ready, or as we've received them.
Right. Okay. So what's the purpose of doing that second set?
It's to show the change, show what we've printed and what we've had to deal with in terms of their files. So they've got that comparison between the two. This is what Queensbury would do with them, and this is actually what they've had to print from.
Well, that's an interesting point. So my feeling is that when people ask for test prints, what they have in their minds is that they're going to find out or check out whether they like our printing or not. But there's a lot more to it than that, isn't there?
Yeah, as part of the test print process, we have a file assessment that goes with the test prints. A hard copy gets physically placed into the pack and is sent with the test prints. And with that, we will do a file assessment. We'll go through all of the files for the album and point out to them particular potential issues.
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. Is the pixelation with images, is the this and that, anything that might cause either a delay to their order or cause us to query the prints.
Okay, so when I asked you about this interview, you said that the problems that you saw, where there were problems, of course, fell mainly into 2 groups. There were technical spec problems and file issues. And if we could go through the technical spec problems first of all, what do you mean by that exactly?
Technical spec ones will mean files don't meet our technical specifications. So, for example, the client will leave adjustment layers in. Now, an adjustment layer will be not an image layer, but a layer that will perform an action above the image layer to apply to the image layer, and they will leave them in place. Now, they get confusing for our color correction team. Where does the client want them applied to? Do they want them applied to the overall layout, or do they just want them applied to particular images? And also, they can cause problems for our print management software. It can spit it out, and if there is adjustment layers in there, and that will cause a problem for it too. So we require clients to merge adjustment layers down to the image that they belong to.
So these come up because we do a lot more than accept JPEGs, right? I mean, the problems we're talking about here aren't a problem if you're doing the normal thing, which is to submit JPEGs for printing.
Yeah, exactly. Because at the Queensbury lab, we accept TIFFs and JPEGs and PSDs, and so we accept with the greater number of file types, and because we request PSDs for color correction, which again, as you say, is a little bit unusual. That's where we get issues coming into play.
So let me just. Why do we accept PSDs? Why do we do that?
Why do we accept PSDs? It's so that the color correction team can alter one particular image or one particular layer within the layout and have the color correction or the changes that they're making to that image not affect everything else. Okay. So if you've got an image that's black and white and you've got an image that's color on a layout, if it was JPEG, anything that you would do to that without marking it out, which would cause, of course, production issues.
Yeah.
Everything would slow on down. Without marking it out, the changes that you'd be making would be global to those two images. So if you're changing the color on the color image to cool it off, you'd affect your black and white image.
Okay, so just to, or for example, borders too. That's another example, isn't it? You can see an effect on somebody's put a black border on it, and then we color correct it, and it ain't black anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we just give ourselves a little plug here, that is one of the differentiating features about the Queensbury Lab, that we will provide these sort of services with you. Whereas normally speaking, if you went to an album company, either they wouldn't do any correction at all, that what we call a print ready service. What you see is what you're going to get back, like it or not. Or if there's any correction, it's just going to be a global thing which applies to the entire layout, which is not necessarily going to do a particularly good job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, PSDs added are larger files, but it gives us so much more potential for making change and giving you a better end result in your prints. Right.
It's probably worth mentioning that, if only because it does explain some of the lengthy upload times that people get.
Exactly.
So actually, that if I can divert there for a minute, that does explain one or two of the things which you see in our file specifications which are unusual. And you just mentioned on your list was single-sided layouts, for example. And we don't like those either, do we?
No, we don't. Because again, with our production software, it causes an issue and it causes the production to slow down, and so that we need to correct them. We've had clients in the past submit single-sided image layouts for color correction. Now, when the color correction team are working on the layouts, they're working on making sure that the images look good across that layout.
Right.
So they're looking at both sides and dealing with both sides all at one time. And of course, with single sides, that means having multiple files open and swapping between files, so that they're looking at them and not just all at one time. It just makes it slows production down.
Okay. Well, the other thing I'll mention about our file specs, it always amuses me when I see this. You guys at the lab want us to say file names must be short. What's short? I always think it means shorter than that. As short as absolutely possible. Is that right?
Yeah, basically.
Why is that?
Because of it causes issues with the print management software. So you're looking at a maximum of about 15 to 20 characters. 20 characters is perfectly fine. Any longer than that, or any special characters, now that can be ampersands or spaces or anything like that, will again cause issues for us.
One of the things about PhotoJunction is the fact that a lot of these issues it does pick up automatically. Is that right? It scans for special characters, for example.
Yeah, it does. And of course, if you're creating album layouts within PhotoJunction, it's going to give you a standardized naming, and so the files will come through to us. They'll meet our specs for the file naming, and there won't be any issues.
Right. Okay. Good point. Let's get on to the second thing then. You said the second group of problems that you're talking about were file issues. So tell me about that.
File issues. If we're checking through files for test print assessment, file issues are things like, is an image has it been used too large, or has it been cropped too much within a layout? Meaning, is it going to pixelate, or is it showing pixelation? Is there artwork concerns? Can I see sensor dust, or can we see red eye through on an image that we need to point out to you? Have you color corrected or made changes to the file to its detriment? For example, have you made the blacks too black, so they're going to print so that they're all blocky and solid color black without detail in them? Now that's a common one we'll see, that people will make an adjustment, and particularly to the adverse of suits and to jackets. So it just appears like they're just wearing a solid band of color, no detail at all, creasing or anything like that.
Right. Tell me what banding is then.
Banding is an issue where tonal graduation. So rather than it being a nice smooth tonal change, you'll get bands of color. Now we can see this particularly through vignetting, that'll often occur, and you'll see it clearly on the screen. Now, there is a way within Photoshop to check and see if you're using vignetting on your files. There is a way to check and see if you're going to have a banding issue when it prints, and that is to go to the image, to the adjustments menu within Photoshop, and choose Equalize. Now that will show you, by selecting the image, it will show you if it'll change the tonal range, and you'll see that if a banding is going to occur.
So all of these problems we're talking about here, the user, the person generating the files, can see, right?
Yeah, particularly for the second set, where we're talking about things that people can see.
Yeah.
And to see them, all you need to do is open your images up in Photoshop before you send them to us and look at them at 100%.
So how do you create those? Oh, okay, you're talking about the actual layout files. The
Layout
files that
files,
you're going to
yep.
send to us for printing.
That's right.
And I assume from what you're saying that not everybody does that.
I would assume too, from the conversations that I have with photographers, and from what I see on my screen, I would almost guarantee that that the numbers of people who are checking are much lower than it
100%.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so that's a really key bit of advice from us, isn't it? Don't
Yes.
just assume that the files are good. Open them up, take a look at them, look for the sometimes obvious problem. For example, one of the confusions, as I understand it, is about rotating images. For example, you can have rotation actions set in Photoshop and then do the same thing sometimes in PhotoJunction, and that queers the pitch, so you get images which are not vertical and they should be horizontal or whatever. All
Yeah,
those sort of
exactly.
things.
It'll distort the image. Now you can see that before you send it to us. We will generally pick up things like that. There have been occasions that we haven't, because we don't know exactly which way the image is supposed to go around. But our print critique team will pick up images like that. But the thing is, if you're picking it up, it's delaying your order, because we're going to go back to you and say, hey, look, we found this issue. And by the time you come back to us, there could be a day or several days has passed. And it's going to cost you more, because we're going to charge you a file handling fee, or if it's a print ready order, we're going to want a new file from you, plus we're going to charge you for reprinting it.
That's a good point. I know that there is an issue with people using our full color service, and can you define that? You tell me what it is.
Full color service. Full color service, what we look to change is color, contrast, and brightness or exposure across an image. So what we look to do is, for natural skin tones, look to maintain highlight detail, which is the detail in the dress, and try and even things through the album, so that across a layer everything looks like it belongs together. And we do the same thing through the album as well.
Right. So, and I think that the thing that you get extra for that at no charge really is somebody's looking at those files and finding the things that we've just suggested that you find before you send the files into us.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to have somebody who's looking through the files and looking over the prints once the prints have been made, just to check for issues and to alert you to them. Now, with Print Ready, we will definitely look at the prints as well, but we don't say that we're going to necessarily notice things.
And you'll only notice them after it, because what you're looking at is the print itself, which has already been printed and paid for, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've got to pay for a new print when we discover the issue.
Yeah. And to be clear about this, I think we take this very seriously. We're not guaranteeing to find all of the things that you might be unhappy about, but we certainly look, because we don't want to then go and put those prints and those files into a highly expensive album and ship it to you, only to find that people are not happy. So we do take it seriously, but there's a kind of a hidden benefit there, I think, with full color service, that we're doing this work for you. You can see the effect of it because we show you that in the test prints, and you find out before it's too late, really. There's still, what you're saying is correct, there are still delays, but it's worth it. Now, one other thing that wasn't, I don't think, mentioned in that description, and that is that we're not, well, we did mention it earlier on, I beg your pardon, that we're correcting individual layers within a layout. So if it's half a dozen pictures there, they'll all be individually corrected.
Yeah, the color corrector will change, if necessary, each of the individual layers.
Right.
So, I mean, within PhotoJunction, you can have 40 images on a layer, and if that was the case, I'd be going through and changing each one of those images just to make it look like it belonged together.
Okay. Now, I was kind of surprised that you didn't mention in there, or maybe we did. We need to look at it separately anyway, and that's soft proofing. I asked Jessica about this, and she feels that a reasonable number of people don't really understand about soft proofing. Would you agree with that? And if so, can you give us some advice?
A reasonable number of people, I would agree, don't understand what soft proofing is, and for our print ready clients, I'd say quite a large percentage of them don't soft proof. I mean, we have
Right.
instances too where print-ready clients don't calibrate their monitor. I mean, it kind of scary stuff. But let's look at soft proofing. Soft proofing basically is part of the color management process. So you've got your profile monitor, you're looking in correct lighting conditions, and by setting up the soft proof profile that we provide, now that's automatically installed with latest versions of PhotoJunction these days, or you can download it from the website. What it enables you to do is simulate how our printer is going to see your file. Right, so you'll see on your screen how our printer is going to see your file.
I'll put the link up, but we've got a page on our website about dealing with this particular issue. A number of the problems that come up, another one that Jessica mentioned was files coming through without profiles. PhotoJunction checks for that too, doesn't it?
PhotoJunction does check to some extent, but it's mainly Photoshop that you'll detect the issue, and you need to make sure that your Photoshop settings are correct. There's a couple of places, one within color settings, that you need to make sure that your images have got an embedded profile, so that you're warned as they come into Photoshop.
Exactly, yeah.
And then one again is saving it to make sure that profile is embedded.
Let me ask you a sort of strategic question about full color service then, getting back to that. I used to say, and I'm just asking you if you agree with this, and feel free to disagree, that if you felt that you didn't want to spend the time, or that Queensberry could do a better job, that you'd get a better result and a better use of your time if you focused on shooting a good image, correctly exposed, and then basically leaving it, designing it in PhotoJunction, doing your layouts and so on, but leaving us to do the color correction. Do you think that gives better results? And if so, what is the reason?
Does it give better results? Yeah, for most people it does. And the reason it is most people is there's a couple of reasons for using our print ready service, and one of them is that you're wanting to control the look of your images.
Right.
Now, with our full color service, we're going to make sure that they are looking good throughout the album, but maybe it's not quite to the look that you're after. But overall, our full color service, absolutely, give it to us. Don't play with your files, don't mess with your files, because the more you do to them, the less that we've got, the potential that we've got to make alterations to your files. You should be out doing something else and leaving it up to the experts. Our print correction team have been doing it for a long time. They started in film, they've moved through to the digital process, so they've been doing it a long time to understand color, so they're the experts.
Right. So then, if you're uncomfortable about this, or you simply want a good job done, full color service is good value for money. But if you want some particular look, some particular punchiness, or color cast, or warm versus cold, or whatever, then you may be better to go for print ready. And the benefit of that, let's face it, is that it's cheaper as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Until you need to reprint a file page, because there's something wrong with it. Anyway, there's some good points there, and we'll bring that out towards the end. Okay, so let's get back to the test prints. You've created these two sets of prints. One of them is print ready, in other words, as received, just pumped straight through the machine. And the other one, you've gone through and corrected them in the way that we're talking about here.
Yep.
What happens? We've done all that work. What happens? Tell us about the report. What goes back to the client? Obviously not just the prints.
Yeah, a report goes back to the clients. So the person who's file assessing them will open up all the files that are used in the album. They'll go through them. They'll look at them all in Photoshop. This is all the printing files. They'll go through and make sure that they meet a number of criteria. Things like, are all the images on the page? Are the pixelation issues? What else can we see that could be wrong with your files that you might not have been aware of, or maybe need reminding of? Are there opacity concerns? And we'll go through and do that for each of the layouts, and then from there a report gets written and is printed and sent in the same pack as the prints. Now that report will mention all of the issues that we've found, or if we haven't found anything, which is all very good, and they will receive the two sets of prints and the report at the same time.
How do people react? Because in a sense, at least occasionally, you must be telling people that I don't know, they could do better.
Yeah,
they've got ugly children, something or other. It sounds like you need to be diplomats at your end.
Yeah, we certainly do. Thankfully, that occurs a lot less often than it used to. But there are still occasions where a client has maybe come to us and said, "Hey, look, I really want to use your print ready service," and to be perfectly honest, their files aren't of a suitable standard for that. and they'll see that when they get the full color service and see the comparison and the difference that has been made by us color correcting their work. And then there are other times where that we've pointed out to them that they've used an image too large, or
Right.
they have a number of other issues within the album that they may need to look at redesigning it, or they need a better file, or all sorts of things like that.
It's interesting, really, because I think it would be wrong to sort of frame it and saying that somebody hasn't, quote, done a good job, because there are so many things there which have got nothing to do with the images. There are design issues. There's the fact that you're getting used to the fact that you're dealing with a new lab, and maybe you don't know what the DPI is and so on, although, as we've said earlier on, PhotoJunction takes care of a lot of those things, or tries to at least. But there's a whole lot of issues there that got nothing to do with print quality.
Yeah, that's right. I think of test prints as the start of a conversation, that it's between the photographer and ourselves. Now, some photographers will come back to us and say, hey, I don't like necessarily what you've completely done with our full color service. I'd prefer this. And that's their preference. And we record that as part of it all, so that we can understand exactly what they want. But as you say, there are, even if there are photographs or images within the album that aren't of a necessarily suitable standard, we're giving them that opportunity to see it in the print as it's going to be in the album before they get the expensive book.
Yeah, we have a page up on the website talking about the things that we check for in full color service, and it was quite interesting to read through it. You've already mentioned the first one, are there opacity issues? In other words, if you reduce it beyond 60%, it might look good on screen, but we know for a fact that it won't look that good in a print, right?
Yeah, and that's actually a really key one. I know that you've put a blog post out. You put a blog post out about 18 months ago, and in particular, it mentions that Queensberry have a particular color setting that can come into play with your lowered opacity images. Now, I definitely recommend people go back and have a look at that so that they can see what that issue potentially can be, because it can alter how you're viewing your lowered opacity images to how they'll come back in the print.
Right. And looking at the other things which have got, again, nothing to do with images, but which you're checking for. And I think this is all in the interest of getting the best possible album. Are there alignment problems in the page layouts? In other words, do the tops not line up? Those little things which look slightly right but not good enough, and therefore they look wrong. You're just being careless. Yep. Are they too close to the page edge? Are there rotational problems, as we were saying earlier on, or scaling problems, or whatever? Are all the images there? Because sometimes that cannot happen. Panorama pages, they can be a problem too, because I don't know, every now and then you'll find that the bride's been sliced in half, or Nana or something like that. All those sort of problems.
Yeah, or even just the way that they're designed. I mean, I was looking at files this morning, and the client had an image that crossed the panorama by a very small amount, 3 or 4 millimeters. And so what they were going to end up with on one side of the page was 3 or 4 millimeters of an image, and the rest of it on the other side. Now, I don't have an issue with the fact that it crossed the layout, but by such a small amount, it just looked wrong.
Yeah. Again, PhotoJunction, I'll get back to asking this, tries to avoid that sort of thing happening, or at least making it 25 millimeters or whatever. I'm kind of surprised that you've mentioned that one, actually. But it's an interesting thing. The problem reporter, or as we call the problem reporter, PJ Nanny, we've spent a lot of time on that, and obviously some people find it quite frustrating, because it's trying not just to make sure that we can make the album, but that when we make it, it's going to look good, right? What's your attitude to Nanny?
I can understand the frustrations that some clients feel. I mean, I do PJ support as well. And so there will be occasions where, they're looking at a screen that's got a whole list of different alignment issues, for example, and they need to look through them all. There are tolerances, so you can set the tolerances within PhotoJunction. And maybe for some of them, like pixelation warnings, they feel that, Nanny's warning them a little bit earlier. But at least it's warning them. We're not just receiving files that look wrong, and they're not just getting the album back and then deciding that there's an issue. They can see it on their system. They can look at their files before it's sent to us.
Yeah. So the two things: if you go through the problem reporter, get rid of all the warnings, or at least look at. We are just warning you about certain things. You can take responsibility, say no, that's fine with me, and ignore that. There are deal breakers, but they're not really the ones that annoy people. I think they're obvious mistakes. They need to be fixed, otherwise we can't make the book.
That's right.
But the warnings, number one, if we go through those, if we go through the problem reporter decide whether the warnings need to be dealt with or not, I guess, and certainly we encourage you to look so seriously at them. And then also, and quite independently of that, as you said earlier on, to open up the layouts, look at them full size, look for problems, make sure that you're happy with those. Don't just send them to us sight unseen.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, let's wrap up. Have you got any other tips? What are your, I don't know, 5 tips, whatever, for a trouble-free experience?
For a trouble-free experience, the one that we've hammered on: open your file layouts. Do check them in Photoshop. Make sure that within PhotoJunction you're looking at the nanny, so that you are going through and, hey, look, at least check them, even if they're warning you and they're not deal breakers and they're just warnings. Do check it, because you don't want to get a book back and you discover that there's an issue with it. Make sure that your files are consistently handled. Put them in the same place so that you're not missing files, so that when the album comes through to us, we're not missing a high-res image, or something hasn't gone wrong, so that that you've not pointed them at low-res images. Make sure that your file management is good as well. Calibrate your monitor. This is one that a lot of people don't think that it's worth the expense, but really it is. It makes a big difference, so that you're seeing color as it should be, as long as it's done correctly, and you're getting a good result back, because you will be able to see. It's a TV store analogy that I use often. You go into a TV store and you see all the different TVs,
Good
all
point.
showing different color, and that's where that by calibrating it, you get a good, much better result.
And if you're not doing that, what you see when it comes back is what you're going to get, because you don't know what you sent to us even. That's really almost literally true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not calibrating your monitor, what you see is probably not what you're going to get back.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
Because by the time we see it, open it up on our, print it through our printer, we're not making any changes to that file at all. But because your screen is not showing it correctly, and the print is just not going to look the same.
Yeah. And the last thing, what I think PhotoJunction would represent well over 95% of the orders that come in.
Oh, well over 95%.
Yeah. And these days, if you're using PhotoJunction, you can't actually send the order unless it's the latest version. That's right.
That's right.
So I know that this is a problem for some people. They've learned how to use another piece of software or whatever. But I think that we need to encourage people to use the software. And the payoff of using the software is to head most of these problems off, or at least alert you to these problems at the pass before they actually get here, because we do want to make the best possible album for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's going, by doing it and listening to the tips that we've given already, use PhotoJunction and check your files. When they come to us, it's going to be a much smoother process through the lab and through making the book, the album itself. And so you're going to get your album back quicker, and potentially it's going to save you money too.
Cool. I appreciate your time, Philip. That was really good. We definitely have a lot of respect for your forensic abilities. So maybe I should let you get back to being a detective.
All right. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.